I'm the president, CEO of the Gary Chamber of Commerce. I'd like to welcome you to this virtual version of our monthly chamber luncheon. I would like to take the opportunity now to say that this is in conjunction with our chamber executive board and our board of directors. I'd like to acknowledge at this time Dr. Gordon Bradshaw, our chairman, Jerome Nelson, our vice chairman, Latanya Woodson, our consultant, and Maria Guillen, who is our treasurer. Other board members are Leon Davis, Michael LeBroy, Rich Rudin, Michael Radbell, and my trusted assistant, Janice Bowden. Also, I'd like to mention that a couple of our wonderful chamber members have stepped up and decided to be sponsors for this event. They are Gary Material Incorporated and Indiana American Water. Both of those businesses, 5 members of the chamber support every initiative that we're involved in. We certainly thank them for their sponsorship. I'd like to introduce to you, for those of you who are unfamiliar, our special guest for January luncheon. As you know, January luncheon is always set aside for the top official in the city of Gary. This young man is a Marine Corps veteran. This young man has served in various capacities of leadership in this community. He's a product of the city of Gary, Indiana, a graduate of New Orleans High School. Folks, I'd like to welcome to this virtual telecast the Honorable Mayor of the city of Gary, Jerome A. Prince. Welcome, Mayor.
Thank you, Chuck. Welcome. Thank you for having me again. Getting pretty used to this, and if you invite me again, it seems like I'm going to be a regular on the chamber event. So,
well,
in any event,
say this though,
speaking
of that, a year ago at the same time, the Gary Chamber, which is customary, we acknowledge, and the mayor is always our speaker. You had just started. You had just taken the oath of office maybe a week before. At the Gary Chamber luncheon, you were welcomed by 500-600 people.
I recall.
Networking, just jovial, everybody having a great time, and a few months later, the whole world changed.
Yeah, I recall that. Certainly was an event that I enjoyed speaking at. I left there sort of unsettled in a sense, largely because of all the dynamics and the gravity of all the challenges that exist. I was, I guess you could say, as fresh and as green as you could possibly be. But having said that, the speech that I left you all with was very specific and short, but very specific to the challenges that appeared within our first week of administration. It almost seems sort of surreal, though, when you think about it, because at that particular time, I had no idea that less than 8 weeks later, we would be facing one of the most critical situations, certainly in that administration, but in the country. And as you know, the last time there was a pandemic in this world or in this country was about 1918. And so, having said that, 2020 was a really, really eye-opening experience, but I think that in a lot of ways it built the fortitude necessary to approach 21 and the subsequent years that are ahead. And so glad to be back again, glad to be in greater spirits, even though we're still experiencing COVID to a significant degree. I feel very keenly that as a community, we've addressed at least the challenges that are associated with it to the best of our ability. And that included sharing information, accurate, timely information with our constituents, but also making sure we keep safe and keeping our families and friends safe. And to that extent, under the guidance of Dr. Walker, a health commissioner, I feel fortunate that as a community, although we've experienced, loss and certainly increased episodes or events of COVID, I think for the most part we fared fairly well, considering that as an African American community, we certainly were projected or predicted to be on the leading edge of all occurrences. And when you couple that with the demographics and the age demographics specifically in this community, I think that at the end of the day, we did fairly well. So,
Mayor, you came in with a plan. When you ran for election for Gary, your vision was to reimagine a Gary. You had a plan, you had an agenda, you had some things you wanted to see done. How did you have to revert? How did you have to alter those plans? Because the immediate need was, as you said, to address this COVID issue, to deal with making decisions to close beaches and businesses, those kinds of things. For a first-term mayor, how did you feel at that point, having to do all of those things literally on the run immediately?
So, great question, and I'd love to take a minute to try to answer that. And so, basically, as you suggested, there was an overall plan, right? And we used it as a campaign slogan or a tagline, but it very quickly became our mantra, and that is to reimagine Gary, because we believe that in order to see the type of change that myself and so many residents were pining for, that you have to take a different perspective, if you will. You certainly have to go about the business of, or conducting the business of city in a different way. And so although the plan and the goals were lofty, we always narrowed it down and focused it to three specific areas of concern. The ones that we heard most of from our communities, the ones certainly that I recognize as a resident of the city, and the ones that in most instances would be at least in the top 10 of your priorities. And that were obviously public safety. We knew that we needed to have a safe city. Certainly we wanted to enhance the aesthetics of the city. We wanted to clean up. We wanted this entire city to be welcoming to anyone who wanted to reside here or to relocate or locate a business here. We believe that the area certainly had to be conducive to that as well. But equally important, Chuck, was that one of our primary focuses was to get a grip on our finances, and not only to address that, but also to be able to share that information with our constituents. And today, that continues to, although we've made some advances, that continues to be a challenge. But we don't want to spend a lot of time on that. I'm here today to talk about all the positive things that are going on. You know, occasionally you have to mention some things that are not as welcoming, you know, to folks. But again, I believe in just shooting straight and being as honest and open and transparent as I possibly can. And so there are some subject areas that we'll cross today in the future, you know, that will reflect what I just said. But in any event, when it got to COVID, right, all of those plans, even though they still existed and we continued to pursue that for a period of about 12 weeks rather, I would absolutely say that a lot of those priorities, even though we addressed them on a daily basis, they took a backseat to what was the most pressing issue of the community, and that was keeping people safe. That, in my opinion, was largely born out of our lack of knowledge relative to exactly what was going on. So we heard the reports out of other parts of the world, and we certainly started to receive statistics and data from cities across the United States. But as of March the 12th, I believe, of 2020, we didn't have one instance or one event of COVID in Lake County. But this administration immediately established two protocols in the event that COVID does a surface in Lake County, but equally important, at the moment that we saw the first case in Gary, we wanted to be prepared with good direction for our constituents and not necessarily be as reactionary as not understanding the total complexities of it would have you to be. And so with that, I believe we, adjusted adequately, and to that extent, I believe that we're prepared to certainly introduce vaccinations at this particular time. We're still performing rapid testing, if you will, and in addition to that, myself, like everyone, and you included, would be glad or will be glad when this subsides and we can return to some semblance of normalcy. I believe that once we get the clearance and things are okay, I believe that you should continue to practice safe interaction practices, but also I believe that there's going to be a celebration across this country, unlike one that you've never seen before. And so to that extent, we're all looking forward to just getting back to what we had gotten to know as some sort of normal.
Let's go back though to some of the pillars that you spoke about. You mentioned public safety. Public safety is obviously important in a community. It's important in business. Hopefully the feedback is not affecting our viewers, but if so, we'll continue along. But let me ask you this from a personal standpoint. Realizing, you mentioned do you think it's fair that people are looking at your approach to trying to help public safety, knowing the situation in the city, its economic situation, but conversely, on the other hand, you knowing that you have an affection, a desire to support public safety? How do you balance what seems to be, what would be obvious to others, that it's just not possible to do certain things, but on feeling as though perception you don't care about public safety? Kind of to be, but I just think you probably should address it.
Well, let me address the last part of that first. And so I don't think it's the general consensus that this administration doesn't care about public safety.
Sure.
Perhaps from a few, or maybe even a little bit more than a few. But that statement or that perspective is more relative to your first question. And that is, do I think it's fair? And I do. I think it's absolutely fair. Okay. I am the mayor of the city. And to that extent, people look for us for guidance, for direction. And sometimes unrealistically, they look for us to be able to
solve all the problems. Yeah.
Well, you said it. But yeah, it feels like that. And as from a very human perspective, it can be frustrating, particularly when you come from a background of service and you approach, and you being me, approach situations or challenges in a manner where we place all of our energies and focus towards coming up with amicable resolutions. It's challenging sometimes to be second guessed, but in any event, I look at those as opportunities to go back and reassess perhaps my approach and to interact with the folks who have a different perspective and try to find some way to be as beneficial as you can to the great good, the entire community, but also look for opportunities to consider the ideas that are submitted by other folks. One thing that I've learned very early on in my governmental experience is that as much as we try to please and satisfy the desire or the perspective of others, there are unfortunately opportunities that we disappoint. And to me, that's probably one of the most unsettling parts of the job, is that period where my actions or lack thereof disappoint someone. But it's, unfortunately, realistic part of what we do, but we try to make sure that those instances are as less frequent as possible.
To deal with the majority, what's best for the majority. All right, the other thing you mentioned was the aesthetic part of the city, and that is a factor as it relates to people wanting to move back, people wanting to establish businesses. It frustrates you, it frustrates me, it frustrates all of our residents when people want to cruise through the city just to see what they perceive to be the ruins of Gary, Indiana. Uh, you are doing, not when I say you, I'm saying your administration and those hardworking people out there, in my view, are doing a Herculean job of at least identifying the fact that this city needs to be cleaned up. I see where you're posting actual avenues of cleanliness where your people are engaged in helping to clean up the city. People ask me, Mayor Prince, about the activity that's going on Broadway. I think most people feel as though activity is good. Seeing demolished buildings, seeing sites maybe being made readily available for businesses or developments or whatever the case might be. Can you kind of give us an insight into, where you can, an insight into what is taking place in the city? What are some of the projects? Some we've read about, some you may want to share, and most notably, some of what's going on around downtown Broadway and other parts of the city.
Sure, sure. And so the first part of your question dealt with the administration or our employees' effort to identify, as you presented it, but also to address those areas and clean it up. And to date, we've pulled over 15,000 tons of trash out of the city, but certainly there's a lot more work to do. But in any event, cleaning up has to be an integral part of the resurgence and the development of opportunities for economic development, if you will. And so that sort of is an excellent segue into what's taking place downtown. Gary Housing Authority, through the Department of HUD, has, for the last couple of years, been extremely engaged in looking for opportunities, to realign or re-envision, if you will, their housing model. They want to get out of the public housing business. And to that extent, they've certainly realized some opportunities right here in downtown. Specifically, we have the Genesis Tower right there on the block of Broadway. But in addition to that, there are other properties throughout the city that, in very short order, residents will be relocated, if you will, and you would see those sites be converted into alternative uses. But specifically on Broadway, in the 600 and 700 block, GHA, in partnership with the city, is engaged in a significant degree of demolition, most of which you probably already noticed, and I believe there's a couple of other structures left to come down. The premise there is to fill those with mixed-use opportunities, such as what's being done across the country. And mixed use, I mean, obviously living in some form of retail in there as well. Those opportunities, the immediate ones that you'll see, and I'm specifically speaking about the one on 7th Avenue and the footprint of the old Memorial Auditorium, will be an affordable housing unit with retail or mixed use, if you will. But also, I think it's really, really important to note that we aren't suggesting through our partnerships with GHA or anyone that the entire downtown becomes a community of affordable housing. We also want to see market rate housing down there as well, and we're pursuing those efforts. In fact, one of the catalyst to realizing that, we believe, is tied to the commuter uh, initiative that's going on in Miller right now, the double tracking project. I'm not sure if you read recently, Chuck, but we finally got the benefit and the mention or notification that that program or that project will be fully funded now. And although we were optimistic about it all throughout the process, to actually secure the funding puts you one step closer to realizing the type of development that I was just speaking of. And so in addition to a transportation-oriented district being established in the Miller area, our focus now will then turn to the downtown area. And we're hoping, in conjunction with the double track and utilization of some of our existing parcels downtown, that we can provide opportunities for market rate housing that will attract persons from all over the county, but certainly Illinois to the west of us also, persons who want to realize market rate housing in a downtown area, close to transportation, but at an affordable or a fraction of what they would pay in some other community. We believe that that's one of our greatest opportunities here. You couple that with a city center, which is a vision of this administration, and that is to bring all of our city services down to downtown Gary, one central location, and culminating in a brand new city hall. Some might say, well, why do you need a new city hall? That's an expense that you could forego, and you certainly shouldn't be even considering at this point. And that's one perspective, and I certainly understand that, particularly when you consider the state of the city's finances. But also on the other side of the coin is the fact that we spend pretty close to $1 million a year in maintenance and upkeep of this facility. And my position is that that certainly isn't sustainable. It isn't a very prudent or economically viable approach at running a city. And to that extent, we believe that not only do the residents who visit City Hall, but our employees certainly deserve better. And the prospect for this building that we sit in, because of its historical nature, obviously would be to turn it into some sort of museum, perhaps seeking historical or historic tax credit dollars as well.
Well, Mayor, first of all, let me get this out first. You mentioned Memorial Auditorium. I want you to know, sentimentally, I dribbled a basketball in that place, Mayor. So I don't know if I may be one of those no, I'm just teasing. I started to say I may be one of those dissenters as it relates to Memorial Auditorium, but no. But what I glean from what you just suggested is, and I'm gonna look at this from a business perspective, from a chamber perspective, from a business person's perspective, is the vision of opportunities, jobs, the vision of, we just concluded a census not long ago. You talked about trying to attract people from all over the place. I think anybody who don't get the gist of the importance of trying to attract people to your community, it brings in additional taxpayers. It gives you the opportunity to have more people contributing to the community. The double track transportation you talked about, with a brand new station in Miller, with an upgraded station downtown Gary, people having to travel only 20, 25 minutes to jobs and opportunities in Chicago and vice versa. It's kind of proactive if you think about it. It's forward thinking. And let's just hope that people who see what's trying to take place here takes place, because you're getting calls, I'm sure you're being inundated with calls from people who are talking about wanting to do things in the city. We're merely the chamber, and we get calls because people call chambers to kind of get ideas of the tax rate, the education system, the crime, what's available, those kinds of things, even prior to they're getting to you and prior to us forwarding them to you and to your people. And so obviously, even in the midst of a pandemic, it seems that there are some very proactive things that are taking place. And that's a discussion that certainly we can have, expound on more, and you could talk about. And trying to think what the third pillar was. Oh, the finances
Yes.
of the city. Now I need you to dispel a rumor, Mayor. It was out there that you came in under the best, most loftiest conditions that a mayor ever had. Man, we had millions of dollars in surplus, and great things were in place. Tell us if that's a fact or not.
So, in short, no.
That sums it up.
Well, yeah, and I hesitate, Chuck, and pause just a little bit, not in or as a result of reluctance to share, because as I said, one of the things that we always speak about and we make efforts to fulfill and do 100% of the time is be as transparent as we possibly can. But there are instances when information has been shared that's less than accurate. It comes a time where you need to, in your quest to be transparent, sort of revisit some of those things as well. And so, my intention isn't to dwell on it, but the reality of it is that we're far from having a surplus. And to that extent, I believe that we've done pretty well with the resources that we've had. We've cut our expenses. We've found areas to generate new revenue, which is something that I'm not certain it's happened in quite some time here. And the generation of revenue, as municipal as it was, certainly was utilizing the resources and opportunities that presently exist. And so we just believe that, yes, there are challenges abound, but I also believe that when you assume a responsibility and you are responsible for the lives of 70,000 or 70,000 plus constituents, that it's my responsibility, right, to do everything we possibly can to create opportunities that benefit our residents, but also make this a greater city. And so earlier you mentioned opportunity, and with the double track, that being opportunity for persons to commute to other cities. But also, we're working on creating some of those opportunities here in the city, ones that will increase our assessed value, one that will generate additional tax revenue, but also ones that will create employment opportunities for our residents that live here. And one such instance would be our announcement of Acumen Technology, seeking to not only locate their corporate headquarters here, but also to establish a manufacturing facility that would manufacture the first 5G cell phone, tablet technology right here in the city. In our discussions and negotiations with them, there are a couple of other benefits that are going to be readily available for our residents. And the one that certainly resonates the most with me, and the one that I'm most excited about, is the partnership that we're going to establish with them and working in conjunction with IUN as well to establish sectors of Wi-Fi in an effort to try to make sure that the entire city has access to the internet. Right now, Chuck, a recent study that we've got our hands on suggested that at least 55% of our population don't have consistent access to the internet.
And that's the way of the world now.
And that's a challenge, right? And it certainly shouldn't be here in the city of Gary. So yeah, we're looking forward to Acumen Technology going online this year. In fact, they also have an offer on two different parcels. One is the old Ivanhoe Gardens housing development area, and ultimately that'll be the location of their manufacturing facility. But also we have engaged in discussions and have an offer on the table for the purchase of the Genesis Center. And I take my time when I say purchase, because as you said, sometimes, or as you alluded to earlier, information gets out and it's just not accurate. And so there was some suggestion that we were going to give these folks the Genesis Center, and nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, there's a pretty significant price tag that's attached to that particular initiative. And we believe that not only will that benefit us in terms of us not having to subsidize the operation of the Genesis Center, paying utilities and things of that nature. As I mentioned earlier, it's going to create employment opportunities. It's certainly by it going online as a private entity, they will pay taxes now. But in addition to that, the Genesis Center will get a brand new facelift. And I think that once you consider some of the other things that we talked about and the development that's going to take place in the downtown area, that center itself would be a wonderful addition to the downtown area. And so we're looking forward to that as well.
All right, the Genesis Center, let's, you kind of covered that real well, but let's talk about the fact that, you know, these citizens here, they have this sentimental attachment to the Genesis Center. I remember when the rollout was with Acumen, when the press conference and all that, one of the principals indicated that the Genesis Center part of it would still be available for community forum, entertainment activities. Does that still exist?
Yes, sir.
Well, that should satisfy, you would think, both sides of the equation. The Genesis Center, maybe people are not aware of the fact, Mayor, in a financially distressed community, how much of a drain it has been on the community and the overall budget, and to be able to address many of these myriad of other needs that people constantly talking about, and rightfully so.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I believe that there's a significant degree of healthy apprehension about anything that you propose, you know, in a city that's had so many challenges historically, you know, over the past few decades. And to that extent, that's why it's incumbent upon us to make sure that as we receive the information, we share it as well. And we've made every effort to do that, and we'll continue to do so. But ultimately, once it comes online and people actually get to see the benefit of it, the aesthetic quality and the aesthetic beauty benefit. But as you mentioned, the ability to utilize the facility and to do so in a state-of-the-art facility or remodeled facility, I think that they'll be equally pleased as well.
You know, I had mentioned early on that clearly your office gets most of the inquiries about. There are a lot of people out there that want to save Gary. A lot of people say, hey, I want to come in, I want to make a difference, I want to bring some business in, I want to do this, I want to do that. I could imagine the calls you get, because I get several of those calls because we're the Chamber of Commerce. I think what is important is from a chamber perspective, and I think I can speak for our membership and our board in this regard. We have been very pleased with the fact that your administration has embraced the chamber, realizing that not just in Gary, but anywhere, a chamber of commerce, a business organization devoted exclusively for business, retention, development, promotion, support, is a vital entity in the community. And so I will take this opportunity publicly to thank you for personally getting involved, suggesting that businesses become members of the chamber. Our deputy mayor has just joined the chamber privately, and other members. And in fairness, my relationship with the Gary City Council has been great in terms of me being the chamber
Sure.
president and CEO. And so I just want to say that in our quest, and I say our quest because it's not yours, mine, it's the entire community. In our quest to have our city revitalized, reimagined, whatever it is we want to say, it's going to take all hands on deck. And so, again, as a starter, I appreciate the fact that you have really committed yourself to supporting the chamber, and we've conversely done the same thing. And so I think it's a marriage made in heaven.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. You know, in terms of the support that this administration shows the chamber, uh, I believe in many ways we'd be hard pressed not to, for a number of reasons. One is in just the most basic of reasons, right? It's pretty clear that the chamber is an integral part of the business community within any municipality. But also, as you stated, oftentimes the chamber may be the first line of communication that anyone has who's seeking information about our city or wanting specific information relative to some of the things that we talked about. The other reason why it's very easy for me to support the chamber is because of Chuck Hughes, right? And just for the record, you don't have to pay me now for that. I'm just kidding. So
No, I paid you during that whole time we were on the city council together.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned that because, listen, I meant that as sincerely as I possibly can. I enjoyed working with you for the time that I was on city council. I know your commitment firsthand. I know your family's commitment to this community. I know your wife's commitment. I know what you do on behalf of the youth in the community. And so to that extent, I also know, and you may not be aware of my knowledge of this, that some of your board members actually contribute to the chamber to make sure that it continues to function. And when I mean contribute, I mean more than just physically. They contribute economically to your chamber. And having that level of commitment from an organization, as I said earlier, I would be hard pressed not to join in those efforts and to say job well done and continue to support you to make the chamber and the city of Gary administration everything that it could be. And I believe by continuing to work together collectively, we can do just that.
Mayor, I think that example that we're trying to set with collective activity, because we're all in this together. And when I say all of this, I could not have held public office. You couldn't hold public office. Our current members couldn't be publicly in office without the citizens of this community. So the citizens who are watching this program, we want you to know that you are an integral part of what takes place as well. And so I am optimistic of the good things that are going to happen in Gary, because I think that you are in a position to be that tied at binds, and everybody is going to have to all hands on deck. Everybody's going to have to be aboard. You mentioned the chamber, and I mean, the chamber is fledgling. I mean, it's kind of difficult when you are based primarily on membership, special events, which we can't do. But then you mentioned people stepping up. I've got board members who, I'm not gonna call the names, but who actually have financially helped to try to keep us going. I will call out one, and that's Majestic Star Casino, because as folks know, the chamber was located in downtown Gary at 839 Broadway. When the former mayor closed the building, we essentially didn't have a location. And I'm gonna be candid, we may not have had the means to try to go somewhere else or whatever, but again, one of our great corporate citizens who are embarking on a big venture that we're gonna talk about next in our community, Majestic Star Casino, provided an opportunity for us to have a smooth transition. We're currently located at Majestic Star Casino. I can't say enough about Janae Erpenbach, Rich Rutan, who's a member of our board, who saw our distress, saw the need, but also, to your point, saw the value of the chamber, and we've been able to sustain ourselves without any interruption. I think that's a perfect segue, Mayor, to the fact that the world knows that there's a magnificent giant structure that's being erected out on Burr Street on 8094. What do you see as the possibilities, opportunities for employment? What do you see for the collateral benefits that the community can derive? And what do you see an anchor facility like that impacting progress or being attractive to others wanting to come into this community?
Yeah, I think one of the greatest benefits is in your last statement, and the fact that a major corporate entities such as Spectacle and Hard Rock have taken a chance on the city of Gary and have invested their dollars here. I think will bode well for at least causing others to take a different look at Gary if they haven't recently. Certainly, with the opening of this facility, it would at least make them explore a little bit differently. In terms of the benefit for the area, clearly it's going to develop an area that had been undeveloped for all of my life, for certain. And couple that with the fact that I believe that as a result of that significant investment, that you'll see ancillary developments in services or things that are not necessarily directly related to the facility, but things that persons who use the facility or who commute to or from there may have an opportunity to seek those services within the vicinity. So we believe that there will be significant additional development within the footprint of that as well. Without question, the fact that they're going to remain in Gary, which means that they'll continue to provide employment for our residents who are currently employed there. But I'm also aware that they will bring on additional employees out there as well. And so there, in addition to it being a economic benefit for the city in terms of assessed value and the additional development that could potentially occur there, it's an economic win for the employees that who will receive a job or employment there, or the ones, as I said, who already are providing for the families, to know that they have the stability of a company who's here to stay and who's committed to them. I think certainly bodes well for all of that. There's other aspects of it, and I just want to use that opportunity to segue into public safety again, because clearly when you introduce new businesses and economic development, you certainly want to ensure those people and those who would visit those places that you can provide security. And so any crime, and I'll just say this to start with, any crime in the community is too much. I mean, let's just acknowledge that. But I'm pleased to say that the year 2020 compared to 2019, we actually saw reductions in several areas of crime. In fact, crimes that related or resulted in death were down 7%. Crimes that involved things of a sexual nature were down 22%. There's a couple of other areas that escape me right now, but the point is that even though we deal with challenges on the public safety side, I believe the men and women who get up and put the uniform on and get in the car every day do their very best to keep this community safe. And it's our responsibility to find ways to augment their efforts, and we're doing just that. We're exploring new technologies, some traditional policing, if you will, but others would include technologies such as LPRs or license plate readers, which collect or actually use a digital, highly technical digital camera and computer to capture a large number of license plates within an area or wherever proximity that the LPR is in. But then they use that data, convert it into text, and compare it to a large number of plates that are in the system, plates of interest that are in the system. We believe that that technology within itself is going to help us to keep the city safe by being able to readily identify the perpetrators of some of those crimes that we mentioned earlier without them even being the wiser that our guys are aware of what they're doing. In addition to that, we're exploring shot spotter technology, which will certainly help with gunfire and things of that nature, being able to specifically identify the area in which it came. Chuck, I would be remiss if I didn't mention this next item, largely because of the efforts of our administration to secure it. And that is, we are looking to secure a total of 50 additional vehicles to replace our very aged fleet of Victorias that exist in the police department. There's 13 that are already being prepared with all the technical gear, and another 37 that will be introduced at some point in this year. But the point is that in some instances, as you alluded to earlier or mentioned, some, depending on the subject, may develop the perspective that there's a lack of attention to public safety simply because we weren't able to provide all of the gaps or fill all of the gaps that existed, such as higher pay or body cams and things of that nature. But let me just suggest that we've already begun to address those areas from a priority perspective, and we're going to continue to do that because we believe that in order for our men and women to do their very best on the street, they certainly need to have the resources necessary to perform their job, but also they need to know that this administration hears and knows and is aware of where the impediments exist, and we're doing everything we can to address them.
Mayor, we talked about the area where the casino is going to be built. And just from a personal perspective, Fresh County Market is probably our premier grocery store in the city. There's a new casino being built out in that area. You mentioned the fact that it will provide an opportunity for further development. I'm a person who grew up in that footprint. I remember the times when our swimming consisted of when the Black Bottoms area that we call that Small Farms area flooded. And we would go out there and swim in those waters. I remember not having to pave streets where the dust was so bad in the summertime that the city would come out and put tar out, and we trekked tar back into our homes and those kind of things. But we were happy that we could get out and run and play, and the dust wouldn't flare up and cause all kinds of problems. So I'm just sitting here visualizing the kind of progress that can take place. So that should be an impact on the west side of the city of Gary. We know that the Miller community has always been proactive, and they've just finished what looks like a streetscape program and others, and they have a viable business community. In terms of the whole city, I know at one time there was a prominent Midtown business district and that kind of thing. What is your vision, or do you have any vision, or is it too far to think ahead from a totality perspective of the other areas of the city as it relates to development?
Sure. So, Chuck, there's activity and interest all over the city right now, and our folks are engaged in discussions with them on a daily basis. A couple of areas that I could point out would be a couple of the old school properties. I don't know if you recall or are aware.
That area around the university, yeah.
Yeah, but our administration actually acquired acquired some of the school properties and have received significant interest in those areas now, largely because the footprint is large enough to facilitate the type of development that we're seeing interest in. And that's mostly surrounded around distribution or transportation or something similar to that. So to answer your question, yeah, Miller continues to thrive. But let me just say there are pockets there that have challenges as well. And so to your point, it's our responsibility to make sure that we look for these opportunities across the city. And in addition to the things that I sort of alluded to relative to the schools, near the university, we have offer on the table to develop the Gleason golf course. You know, sort of controversial, again, sort of like the Genesis Center because of the historic aspects and elements of it. But Chuck, that coupled with the Gleason or the Gilroy Stadium is about 120 acres. And even though we are the largest city in Northwest Indiana, being 54 square miles, what we don't have is an abundance of areas that have parcels that are large enough to facilitate the type of development where we see interest. And so if you just look across the board, across the country, distribution centers are popping up and sprouting up everywhere. And we've seen significant interest in from entities wanting to do the same here. We believe that it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we not only identify areas where this type of development can take place, but that we do everything we possibly can to prepare those areas, whether it be the assemblage of parcels or to address some of the other things that we talked about, such as the aesthetics of the city and public safety to make it more conducive for them to come here. But there's another element that I was going to, and I'd like to take an opportunity to speak about briefly. Mm-hmm. And again, not trying to convince you or anyone at this particular point, but certainly wanting to share what the overall vision and where we see gaps in the city and where the greatest need exists. And one of those would be in the area of education. Mm-hmm. You know, recently I discussed and will continue to do my desire to explore the opportunity for a polytechnic high school, specifically Purdue Polytechnic. And initially, as we presumed, it was slightly controversial in that I believe we all know the historic controversy that's always been surrounded around the introduction of charter schools within the city of Gary. But also, we also are aware of the challenges that our traditional public school has faced over the years, specifically as it relates to academic performance. You know, let me make it 100% clear. I support our Gary Public Schools 100%. I'm a product of the Gary Public Schools. My children all attended Gary Public Schools. My parents were graduates of Roosevelt. And so I emphatically support the Gary Public School system. But also, I support the opportunity for our overachievers, our children who want and can perform at a greater level. I support the opportunity for them to have a facility, a organization, an entity, a school education that would prepare them for the rigors of not only college, but employment after high school, because I think it's pretty clear that everyone's not going to attend college, and that's understood. But as we continue to see advances in technology and the very specific nature that's surrounded around employment, I think that we have a responsibility to provide every opportunity that we possibly can right here in this community for our citizens, and in this instance for our children. One of the things that happens, Chuck, and I'm sure you probably get this also, is that when people call City Hall or the chamber or whatever, talking about they like to consider relocating to Gary or bringing their businesses, one of the questions that almost always comes up is, where can I send the kids to a top-rated educational institution if I live in Gary? And unfortunately, the answer is outside of the city. And if you just consider the fact that I think we have about 12,000 children within the school boundaries that are eligible to attend our schools, but only a little bit less than 5,000 actually attend. To me, that suggests that 7,000 kids are going elsewhere. They're either attending some of the charter schools, or in some instances, they're attending school outside of the city of Gary. We want to bring those people back, and we believe that if we provide an opportunity for them with a top-rated, renowned schools such as IU, or sorry, in this instance, Purdue Polytech, in conjunction with IU, and in a perfect scenario, we would have a collaboration between Purdue, IU, as well as Ivy Tech and the Gary Community School Corporation. We believe that we could provide those opportunities for our students immediately. And immediately is the operative word here, Chuck.
Well, you know,
We
I
need to
think
provide
I
those
think the
opportunities
value
now.
I think the value of a program like this is you get an opportunity to express what your true feelings are. Uh, uh, you know, I don't get the impression now that there's any kind of adversarial relationship. It's either go this route, Purdue, Polytech, discard the Gary public school system. I think you've clearly suggested that you are concerned about education for everybody in the city. And I think that's important. And I think having you make that public assertion is going to bode well for folks in the community who want to see what you're indicating, that there is an option for those who excel beyond the norm, and an opportunity maybe to get into institutions and programs in those institutions that qualify for. But the fact that you are committed to working with and on behalf of the part of the community, a large part of the community, that will still engage itself in the Gary public school system. So I think that that's a great idea. The chamber actually is working in partnership with our Step Up for Education initiative with the Gary Community School Corporation. And we expect to launch that pretty quickly. And we're just happy to know that, you know, you'll be a part of that as well, because again, I think clearly we're indicating here on this program that, be it education, be it jobs, be it business, be it whatever it is, whatever's good for the community, all hands are on deck.
Absolutely. And so I've worked with you with children prior to this, and I certainly will continue. But also, you know, as you expressed, I am absolutely committed to the success of all children, and certainly committed to the success of the Gary Community School Corporation. You know, recently, as you're aware, there was a referendum, and I didn't take a public position on it because I thought it was incumbent upon the persons who have children in school certainly to speak up and exercise their voice, but also the community at large. And they did resoundingly. They supported that referendum 60%, I believe 60% to 40%. And I mention that to say is that clearly there's a desire of the community also support our public school system. But as we mentioned previously, and I did, and you sort of hit on it as well, to provide opportunities for those who are achieving at or above grade level right here within the city certainly is a noteworthy initiative and something that we're going to continue to pursue, because we believe it's our responsibility to provide the very best opportunities for all of our citizens, and that's the focus and that's the goal.
Mayor, let's leave the city of Gary momentarily. I mean, don't throw it out of your mind, but let's leave the city of Gary momentarily, because as we talked about earlier, we are getting inquiries from people all around the country. I mean, people will recognize Gary. There's a spotlight on Gary, and that's a prerequisite to what is going on nationally. We have just elected a president-elect, but a president, Joe Biden, a Democrat. Kamala Harris, African-American vice president. Joe Biden indicated in his acceptance speech that he owes his election to the Black community. He's going to do infrastructure work and other projects that are going to help and embolden and embody and support urban areas. You would think for sure Kamala Harris and Cory Booker and some of those folks who are key advisors to President Joe Biden will also push this urban agenda. What do you see in terms of Gary, Indiana, I finally say being the poster child of a majority African-American, majority minority, majority community with economic distress, the type of community that they want to convert and support or whatever? What do you see is your optimism level at 100%, or what opportunities do you see with that expressed agenda by our new Democratic administration?
Yeah, so to answer that question, I guess I'd have to point to the 20 years experience I've had as an elected official. And I believe that most people who come into office do so with the greatest of intentions of helping everyone. I mention that to say that although the conditions that you mentioned are certainly reflected here in the city, but those conditions exist in many municipalities across the country. But to be clear, even though we left Gary for a second, my focus is right here. And so to that extent, we're developing a federal agenda, legislative agenda, if you will. And fortunately, we have folks who are a part of our team who know some of those folks, and we're looking to get a meeting with the vice president and if possible, the president here sometime in the early part of this year. But we'll be prepared when we do because sometimes you only get one of those opportunities, right. And we'll certainly be prepared to present our city in the best light, but also to share the challenges that we exist and make whatever requests or ask that we have very specific, and so as to not waste their time, but also to capture their attention and provide them an opportunity to see the city, even if it's for a short period, to visualize the city as we do. And we believe the best way to do that is to make sure that we get our stuff in order here, and to make sure that when we make that visit, that we certainly have proven that we are doing everything that we possibly can to bring ourselves up also, but make it very, very clear that we certainly need some assistance as well. But we aren't looking for handouts. We want to earn and deserve everything that we can. We believe that the resurgence or the rebuilding of any community is built on the residents that live there, and anything that you receive in addition to that is icing on the cake, if you will. And so we're going to continue to pursue the efforts that we are here and address the areas of authority that I mentioned to you also, because at the end of it, I think the biggest difference between being an elected official on a national scale, such as the White House, or here, right, in the city of Gary, are the concerns of your constituents. And so a lot of similarities, but the people here want to see the basics. They want it safe. They want streets paved, right? They want good education. They want to make sure that their public officials are honest, right? And feel with integrity. But they also want to realize opportunities that they could pass on to their families as well. And Chuck, we're well on our way to making sure that we do everything we can to help them realize those areas.
Well, Mayor, this, as you know, is sort of groundbreaking. This has been a virtual Gary Chamber luncheon. But by the same token, all of those folks out there who are witnessing this, and including myself, lunch is being virtual as well. So it's probably lunchtime. So what I would like for you to do before we wrap things up is, if you have just any final word that will encompass any thought that you might have that you want to share with the viewing audience, do so right now.
Yeah, so I'd like the viewing audience to consider Gary as a blank canvas, if you will. And to that extent, I would like for them to take a really good look at the opportunities that exist. I'd like for them to continue to scrutinize our leadership as they should be. I'd like for your listening audience, in particular the chamber, to know that we have an open door policy and that we're willing and ready to communicate and collaborate with you all and any other business entity out there that wants to bring those sort of benefits to the city of Gary. But most of all, I want them to know that I appreciate the pleasure and the honor of sitting here today. I certainly appreciate all the people who supported the reimagined vision for the past year and who continue to do so. And just looking forward for a better 21, certainly than we had in 2020. But after that, I just want to continue this upward trajectory, if you will. And I want your constituents and your viewers to be encouraged by that and to continue to spread the word that it's a new day in Gary.
Well, this virtual performance has been presented by two very outstanding sponsors who are located in the city of Gary. Gary Material Supply at 7318 West 15th Avenue in Gary. And also Indiana American Water, a staple in our Gary community. Mayor Prince, again, I think we covered a wide range of topics. I applaud you on your candor, addressing probably every issue out here in the community. I'm sure we'll be doing this again. So on behalf of our board of directors of the Gary Chamber of Commerce and our members, and I do want to say about our members, because we have, even in the midst of this COVID-19, many of our members have remained loyal to the Gary Chamber of Commerce. And with your efforts and the efforts of some others, we expect to gain more members, particularly now that they are aware of the fact that it's integral to the success of this community that the Chamber and City Hall and everybody else is working together. And if nothing else, Mayor, I think that we've done a great job. You've done a tremendous job of dispelling some of the myths, some of the rumors. We don't all have to agree on every issue,
right,
but in fact, we all have to agree that we want to see this city remain, I won't say great, super. I don't want to use the term great for a while, super. So again, Mayor, on behalf of the Gary Chamber of Commerce and our monthly luncheon, thank you. And we really wish all of you out there to have a wonderful, joyful, and safe rest of the day. Thank you so much for tuning in.
thank you.